So what we want to talk about as our main topic this week on Mastering Dungeons is creating a campaign right now. We are going to build one with your help because we've talked about what should we talk about next. And one is let's create the perfect campaign guide, of course, which there is no such thing as, but with your help, maybe we can come very, very close. So you want to take the first step here?
Sure. So, we've talked about a number of angles on campaign creation, like thinking about big elements or thinking about small, right? Do you start at the top or the bottom? How do you kind of come up with these ideas, and then how do you work off of them? So does anybody have some ideas that they're thinking about around possible cool campaign concepts? Yes, Keith.
All right, I'm gonna be the jerk here. Medium-low magic.
Mm-hmm.
So magic is rare enough to stay magical.
Mm-hmm.
You can go into most medium to large cities and find a magic shop. It sells common magic items and material components, as well as knickknacks meant to get regular folks in the door, focus charms and stuff. Any magic of uncommon rarity or greater, you have to find or commission or buy at an auction. It's not generally available over the counter.
Okay. So I'm just going to repeat that in case it didn't get heard. So a medium to low magic setting where there might be a magic shop in a large city, but it's rare enough that it's not going to be powerful magic, and any of the rare, very rare stuff you cannot buy, you have to find. My first question when I hear level of magic in a setting is that just the setting, or is that the characters as well? Are we going to limit character magic, or are we just limiting the magic of the world itself?
Do you want me to answer that?
Sure.
So the idea is that yes, the PCs can have a higher level of magic because they are exceptional, but in general, magical ability is on par with, say, having a PhD.
Okay.
Maybe 2% of the population at most.
What about 2 master's degrees? Asking for a friend.
That's multi-classing.
Okay. So we're not going to limit the 5e rules of magic.
Well, so let me back up, because I was going to ask you, Shawn, when you hear a concept like this, which we could pretend came into our brains, at night, whereas we were about to sleep. Sorry, honey, hold on, I just need to make a note. If you woke up in the morning and said, wow, I had this idea, like, how would you, where would you go next? Because I think that's something that a lot of people might ask as DMs. Like, I have this idea. Where should I go next?
For me, it depends on my mindset at the time. Right now, I'm heavy into player rules, which is why I asked. Okay. So my thing would be, we have to reflect don't touch the table. We have to reflect the rules of the player to show them what the world is. If I say it's a low magic setting, but they are still casting Wish, then is it a low magic setting? So I have to decide, how am I going to model the world through the player rules? And so that's what I would do first with who I am right now.
And I had the totally opposite thought, which is I was thinking, well, if this is going to be important enough to our world, then I want to explain why this is, right? Like, maybe magic has begun to waste away. And there are tales of the days of yore when magic was strong and flowed. But now, items seem to lose power over time. And the really rare stuff, you've got to go into the dangerous places to reclaim, right? Like, the story of why this is going to be exciting, like, because imagine telling the player, and then you won't have any magic items, and you can't buy them in shops, so you can't get what you want, right? And all the players are like, yeah, well, I got a special finger to share with you, and so getting that buy-in might be through saying, but no, it's this cool thing that you will actually benefit from. Like, the story will be cooler because of it.
Right, and that's because I'm coming at it as a designer right now, not the game master. And as soon as you start saying, I need to get the story setting, my mind immediately goes to, how deeply are you going to do this before you introduce it to your players, when the players may say, yeah, not interested. So getting the player buy-in on that if you're a game master, is important right from the start. And I would then want to build the world with them rather than build it and then present it to them. If I was going to move in a direction that's outside of the sort of standard setting, which is now Greyhawk, which is that mid to low magic, I would consider yes, but yeah. So I would want to build it
until you get into one of Gary's dungeons and
true,
bags full of stuff.
True. So okay, so we've got a pitch. I feel like we need something else. I think we need the this meets this. Yes, please.
The world is at war, and it is weary of it. Battle lines have been drawn in scarred countries, isolating them from each other. And getting from one place to another requires smuggling or some other passing of bribes. You don't know what else is out there.
Damn, I want to play this game right now. Everybody leave.
So that was said so well, I don't even know how to repeat it, but the world is at war. There are battle lines. Even moving from one place to the other requires you to find a way, bribe or whatever. So there's some dark edge to that. That's really cool.
That is really cool. And so now I'm thinking adventures that we could do within that. What do we do at levels 1 to 4? What do we do at levels, what's after 4? 5 to 10. And so
I don't want to spoil it.
Yeah.
If this is your first time counting, I mean, really, you want to discover it. It's so good. Wait till you find the alphabet. It's similar but different.
Oh my gosh, there's 26 of them?
There's a whole lore history about the alphabet, but I'm not going to bore you now.
Yeah, this is what we do off the mics, is mock each other, or on the mics. So that's what I'm doing. Like, what is the adventure that comes from this? So I am going to have them be war weary. All right, they're going to be soldiers or an elite unit that has been it's been burned. Right, they were deserters. Maybe one deserted because they're a coward. Maybe another deserted because they are they're just tired of having killed so many folks. I'm making backgrounds now. I'm making backgrounds. Deserting for love, right? Give them a reason. And so now I'm in my head making backgrounds that I can say, hey, players, you can make your own story, but here are some stories that I, as the game master, would love to tell with you. Here's backgrounds.
Yeah, and because behind all of this is there's one thing, which is presenting your campaign to the gang or the audience, depending on whether you're publishing or it's just your group. But getting that buy-in requires making it personal, right? And to really tell stories together, we have to give the players that thing that they're going to dig into. And so this is the kind of thinking, I totally want to have around a campaign.
So we've got the world and a pitch for the world. What else do we need?
Well, I might add on this subject just that like I want to start designing, right? But one of the things we talked about is that restraint of like, I want to be like, ooh, maybe there should be like a weary thing but that's also where now you're changing the game. So maybe you don't want to do that. And so you might hold back from that. But if you're publishing a setting, you could think of like, if I'm going to have a couple of rules that are custom and new, should something be there to reinforce this play? Maybe, right? It might be worth trying out and play testing, whether there should be something to capture this. But maybe it's just examples of play, like ways to cross borders, right? Because that might be a thing that you run into that's problematic. If you always are making these checks, so you always have a barrier crossing over, how do we make that fun rather than like repetitive or a barrier, right? An actual barrier to the gameplay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because now when you say barrier, I'm thinking exploration. And when you talk about exploration, we're in this gray area. One of the questions that we could have talked about was the exploration pillar and how do you make it better? How do you gamify it and so on? So when I see barrier, right, exploration is going from the unknown to the known or learning something. So now I'm starting this group or starting the adventure that I'm going to write on the other side of the world, and they're trying to get to this side of the world. And as Teos said, what's the barrier from this region to the next? Maybe it's a magical barrier. From this region to the next, it's a military barrier. And we're going to make themes around that with each of the adventures or sections of adventures that I'm writing.
Cool. Do we want to add another idea in?
Let's do it. Oh, way in the back. No. Yeah.
All right, the reason that magic isn't so common anymore is that all the wars have been killing off the dragons that are the anchor for the weave in the world.
I love killing off dragons. And then having them come back.
So Dr. Megan Connolly had the supposition that if the magic is tied to dragons and the dragons have been being killed off in the wars, then that's why we have less magic and magic items are less strong. And that's awesome, right? That's really cool. And that starts giving us real story seeds, right? If you think about the arc, like one of the things that Mike Shea does so well, and actually the new DMG does pretty well, is to say, like, when you're building like your 1 to 20 idea for what a campaign could be or whatever you're going to, you think about those arcs of where the adventure could go. And now we can, that this has a lot for that, right? This offers us a lot towards that.
Right. And so if the dragons are being killed or have died off, what does that mean of the monsters of the world, the ecology of the world? Is it possible to bring magic back if you are able to team up with dragons, or are dragons evil rampaging beasts that you don't want anything to do with? And that could be one of the barriers that you're trying to cross. Is this was a realm that was filled with dragons. Do you need to fight them? Do you need to interact with them in some way to pass through that region as you're heading back home?
Like Dragonlance had so much fun with that whole like good versus evil dragons and the balance that sort of is in Kryn, right? And you could work off of that. Like, what if you had, these 4 sides of dragons or something, and they're both old and diminished, and maybe the balance is off, right? And maybe we find that the wars have actually been perpetuated by one of them or something like that. That could be interesting too.
Yeah, and now I'm picking up Kobold Press's Dragon Magic and reading that through, see if I have any ideas about things that you could do with dragons.
And then Dragon Heist, because it's all about dragons and heists.
That's only in Waterdeep.
Oh.
Yeah. So I feel like we need one more idea. Troy.
I feel like, an inciting incident. You got loaded mid magic, the war tour, going off Teos is, is going away, the dragons are dying, the group finds an egg or something, and that's what allows the characters to progress in magic normally, where everybody else is stuck at first level at best.
Okay.
And so they've got to decide which of the 4 dragons do you take it to? What side do you lean to? And it's like a beacon. Now everybody's after them, so they have to pick quickly and go.
Okay. Good. Yes. Now we also need to decide if the characters are going to be fighting something will need access to magic as well. So the characters have that dragon egg, but there are other dragon eggs out there that...
Just to capture that this idea that Troy was saying was as an inciting incident, right, in case it didn't record, like a dragon egg that they find to decide where to take it.
Yeah, you said if you need a power source, you think like that, the dead dragons, the items made for them still maintain their magical power. That's actually like the weapon caches and armaments for all these countries. So they don't want the egg to hatch and there be more magical world for everybody, so they'll be wanting to take it.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So Chris just said there are magic items, but they are made with dragon parts, and that still holds the magic. And now you've got an underground economy, possibly smuggling. You can bring in all of these elements as well.
This is bringing to mind 13th Age and their icon system.
Okay.
You have a bunch of different icons directing things in the world, and who you align with determines who is against you and who is tenuously in your favor.
You talk about 13th Age once every 10 minutes. So
I do it every time you bring up fate. It's like that's our.
I haven't said fate. Well, I just said fate. Never mind.
Yeah. I always look at the icons in 13th Age. They always feel to me like almost like when I first understood this idea of like, oh, the deities draw power from their clerics. Like, to me, it feels very much like that. And so that would really work to say these dragons are icons. And so maybe they're not just as simple as like, oh, colors and alignments, but what if they are like actual true concepts of life, like almost like they're pantheistic. And so now those choices you're making around like who you take a dragon egg to is really substantial, and maybe certain nations are aligned with them based on these ideals that they represent, and that's good fodder for conflict.
All right, I think we've got a good shell here. What do we have next?
Well,
Or do we have anything next?
I mean, I think we could choose that. Like, do we want to talk about the adventure we would do, the campaign sketch? Like, what do you?
I think we need the world now. I think we've got enough of a story idea that we need to build the world not only in a way that captures all of these points, but that is accepting of the adventures that we want to put into it. So we need to think about those multiple threads. Fate. I just tried to scare him. Multiple threads to have the adventure work with the world in a way that supports the campaign.
Yeah. Yeah. So would you start at the top? Where'd you?
Let's go to a map builder to tell us about the world.
Yeah, we need the canvas, and I was thinking maybe the world changed over a few thousand years. You have warm periods when the oceans rise, so the continents get smaller, and then they lower when it gets colder, because that way you can have islands that are stable over a long time, so there might be a reason to fight over them. So dragons want to have their lairs and stuff in certain areas. And that is also a place where you can find all ancient ruins and remains of cities and stuff that was at the shoreline, even in the middle of the desert, because once every 5,000 years or so it's flooded. So you give the landscape a history that you can build into old ancient legends and stuff like that. So you can...
That's great. And so if we're going to use regular 5e dragon rules, the Arctic area would be where the white dragon is if you choose there. Yeah. Okay.
But that would be really interesting if that has changed, right? If the Arctic white area was actually like, tropical before, that's kind of neat. And that everybody, they're like, that would really set the world off, right? When it's.
And that's what I'm going to mention Aurora now because I have to, because that's my dragon campaign. That's what I wanted to do in the first draft.
Campaign, Shawn.
In the first draft, it was dragons were put in charge of areas, but since red dragons are better at fighting cold creatures, the red dragons were put in the Arctic region, and they hated it but they serve someone else, and they're miserable, and that's why they're mean and no one wants to deal with them. Same thing, the white dragons in the volcanic areas, but just to give that a little twist.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I'm just gonna sit here thinking about it.
Okay.
There's no one in this room other than us, right?
Nobody at all. So what other things about the world do we want to include? Andrew.
Well, I caught on to this smuggling piece of it because I think about like what's going to be unique about my game. Like there's 30 games at this con that have low to medium magic and dragons and things, but like I don't know any games. I mean, there might be some, but where smuggling or kind of going around the war is kind of the core thing. So maybe this is a stealth game, or maybe that's something I would think about. And for smuggling to work, you'd need to, Keith's original point where magic items and shops and stuff, you need to have a robust economy now so that in order to smuggle something and for that to be meaningful, it needs to be something that people in this place want and people in this place can't get, sort of thing. So
Okay.
I think about the mechanics I can include and the kind of building blocks I need to support that kind of emergent gameplay.
Okay. I'm going to ask a question back. Do you need mechanics to support it, or is just the story of smuggling enough? Do we need to gamify it, or do we?
Yes.
Okay.
What I let that be a lesson. Where I went was we had talked about in a previous show the importance of factions and organizations, and that might be a thing that can step in here and carry a lot of that weight. It could be an opportunity to talk about what are the groups that are allowed to go between the lines. How do we define these different areas of the world, whatever they are, nations, entities, these zones, and through that might be some interesting things that then tie also into the icon like dragons as well.
I don't know if this is, so I like the smuggling idea. My brain is going like, basically there is some group of people that go through old ruins, which is a fairly common thing, but the goal is explicitly to find smuggling routes, which if you can find and create and kind of like map a safe smuggling route, that can get you a lot of money depending on who you do that route to.
Okay.
So that could be.
You want to repeat that?
Yeah. So Lila was talking about if we had, if smuggling routes, finding smuggling routes is a big part of the campaign, because of all these aspects we've talked about. And my brain thought, well, if we talk about all this like environmental change and long history and things have changed drastically, the whole place could be ruins all the way down, right? And so that could then be like, yeah, there are always these ways to get underneath and that connect things that go over under the borders, if you can brave them and if you can find them, and that's neat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, go ahead.
Hey.
Oh, I didn't see him there. Oh my gosh.
I like to add a little bit of moral dilemmas to worlds, and I think this would be cool if every side legitimately thought like they were the good side, fighting for a just cause, and they all could explain it as such. That way it puts the characters in a more ambiguity, but reflective of also like life. Everyone can think they're good and do these things.
Yeah, and that works into the factions that you were saying.
Yeah, moral ambiguity and everybody believing. Yeah, that's awesome.
I was going to say somebody we haven't heard from yet, but we've heard from everybody so far. So Megan, go ahead.
Just one thing that I think gets left out in these kind of epic stories that makes the world feel flat is thinking about families. People are raising children in these worlds. What does that look like in these war-torn worlds with smuggling and these factions?
Right, and it can be different from area to area, very different depending on
family
how
impact,
close they are to
social.
the front lines, how rich that particular civilization is, where the war actually was fought. All of those things are great points for the campaign.
And that could be a unifying element where if you're old, like who your people used to be is actually a lot like what someone is now, right? Like you're closer than you think, but you can't see it. Steve?
Adding on the idea of maybe part of what you mentioned being possibly being defectors, like maybe you're partly responsible for why the dragons aren't here anymore. Maybe you contributed and those scales have fell, sort of speak.
If you give, I just want to repeat that. If you get, right, if you as the characters
the Brexit
were a big part of why all of this is happening, even the war itself or the dragon's demise.
Finding that egg is finally like, oh wow, it's new.
Right.
So looking at the time we have, maybe we should ask, how does it all end?
Fire.
In fire was heard several times.
Well, do we want to say how it all ends?
I don't know.
Because that's why we play the game, Teos Abadia.
Maybe, or where, well, yeah, that's always a good question. We can talk about the whole episode, but yeah.
Oh, maybe there's this strange light in the sky, and you leave it for, the game master to determine, is that like a world-ending asteroid? Is that some sort of, I don't know, like space-faring race that's coming to, obliterate or take over or what?
Wow.
The mysterious light in the sky that the DM gets to decide what it is and what it, become.
All right. Two more questions. Chris, go ahead.
If we're talking about how it's going to end, like, have this egg, eventually it's going to hatch. Then you have to decide, I assume the campaign arc is like, you have this egg, decide what to do with it, eventually it hatches, then you have a dragon. Like, then you have to decide what to do with it. Do you raise it? And then at the end of the campaign, like, do you become your own nation?
Sure.
Wow.
And then you can use your acquisitions incorporated rules to then still.
I love you, Chris Nizak. Troy.
If you wanted to make this a organized play campaign, the factions could then determine who wins at the end.
That's true. Yeah.
And make it very exclusive. You calculate points.
For those who couldn't hear it as we wrap up here, Troy has just promised to run an organized play campaign, if I heard correctly, based on this, and
Organized Brexit.
Thank you guys.
Thank you,
this was
everybody.
amazing, everybody.
Thank
Thank
you
you
so
so much
much.
for being here. I love you.